Step aside. First class isn't for you." The words cut across the boarding gate like a whip. Sharp, public, designed to sting. Every head turned. A woman in emerald green stood at the center, suitcase in hand, phone pressed to her ear. Her face was calm, but her silence carried more weight than any outburst. Two uniformed officers closed in on either side, their polished shoes striking the tile like a drumbeat of authority. Behind them, the gate manager crossed her arms, watching with the certainty of someone who thought she had already won. Passengers whispered. Some raised their phones. One man muttered, "She hasn't done anything." Another replied, "They think she doesn't belong." The air grew thick, not with noise but with judgment. The woman did not argue. She adjusted her grip on the suitcase handle. Her eyes narrowed, not in fear but in recognition. She had seen this theater before many times. The script was always the same: assumption, accusation, erasure. And yet she stood still, letting the silence stretch, letting the arrogance around her echo louder than any defense she could offer. One officer leaned closer, voice flat but forceful. "Ma'am, you're holding up priority boarding. Move now." Still, she said nothing. Her only motion was a slow press of her thumb against the edge of her phone, an action so subtle it could be mistaken for nervous habit. But it wasn't. It was protocol. It was proof. The gate manager's voice rang out again, firm enough to reach the waiting area. "People like you try this all the time. You're not on the list. Security escort her out." Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A woman in row 2 whispered, "That can't be right." Her friend pulled out a phone and hit record. Another passenger leaned forward, his expression sharp. "This is wrong. She's not resisting." The two officers tightened formation, their broad shoulders boxing her in. Their presence wasn't protective, it was accusatory. And yet, she walked with them, unshaken. Her expression said more than any protest could. "I will not dignify this with panic." The overhead sign glowed above her, "First-class priority boarding." The irony was not lost on anyone watching. She raised the phone closer to her lips, voice low but razor-sharp. "Log this moment. Time, location, witnesses, and tell them it's happening again." The passengers closest to her stiffened. They didn't know her name yet. They didn't know her story. But something in her tone carried authority, the kind that didn't need volume. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. Her silence was not weakness. It was the gathering of a storm. And the officers walking beside her had no idea how close they were to standing in the path of their own undoing. The boarding area looked like any other late afternoon at the airport. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, polished tile floors reflecting hurried footsteps, the distant echo of rolling suitcases. Families gathered in clusters, business travelers scrolled through emails. But in the middle of Gate B6, one woman had become the center of gravity. She wasn't draped in designer labels or flaunting status symbols. Just a tailored green dress, clean lines, sharp confidence. No entourage, no loud presence. To the untrained eye, she looked like another passenger quietly waiting to board. That was the point. Her name, Vanessa Carter. To the airline, she was nothing more than a name on a boarding pass. To the world, she was a CEO who had built a billion-dollar empire from the ground up. But she hadn't come to the gate with fanfare. She had come to see, once again, how people like her were treated when the armor of wealth and status was stripped away. Vanessa's eyes swept the concourse. Every movement was measured, every breath deliberate. She remembered another airport, 2 decades ago, when she was just out of grad school, wearing discount slacks and clutching a ticket bought with borrowed money. A gate agent had looked her up and down and said, "We'll need to verify this again." She missed her flight that day. The sting of being doubted for how she looked, not what she carried, not what she earned, never left her. Now she was back in a nearly identical scene. Only this time the stakes were higher. She wasn't just testing patience, she was testing a system. The two officers flanked her, their faces unreadable but their stance unmistakable. They didn't see a paying customer, they saw a problem to be handled. The gate manager leaned against the podium, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line of authority. Her gaze wasn't neutral, it was dismissive, the kind of look reserved for someone assumed to be out of place. Vanessa shifted her phone slightly, hearing the quiet voice on the other end. Her assistant, calm, efficient, waiting for instructions. Not yet, Vanessa thought. Timing mattered. Exposure mattered. She wanted the full weight of this injustice recorded, witnessed, undeniable. A young man in the waiting area pulled out his phone and whispered to his friend, "This is discrimination." His friend hesitated, then pressed record. Others followed. Dozens of small lenses rose, capturing the moment from every angle. The air thickened. This wasn't just an argument about a boarding pass anymore. It was a stage. Vanessa's heart rate didn't spike. Her pulse stayed steady. Years of boardrooms, negotiations, and battles fought in silence had prepared her for this. She didn't need to shout to be heard. The arrogance of others would shout for her. The officer to her left cleared his throat, speaking low enough for her but loud enough for the crowd. "Ma'am, cooperate and this'll be quick." Vanessa turned her head just slightly, her eyes locking onto his with quiet fire. "Quick for you," she murmured, "but not for them." She tilted her chin toward the watching passengers. He blinked, thrown off by the calm certainty in her tone. Vanessa Carter wasn't fighting to prove she belonged in first class. She was preparing to remind them who truly owned the skies they patrolled. The boarding gate had grown uncomfortably still, as if the entire terminal paused to see how far this would go. The gate manager, a woman in a crisp navy blazer, leaned closer to her microphone and announced with a brittle smile, "Priority boarding will resume shortly. We're handling an unauthorized attempt at entry." Her words weren't just an update, they were a verdict, delivered to an audience of hundreds. Passengers stirred. Some frowned. A man in a business suit muttered, "Unauthorized?" She had a ticket. His neighbor hushed him, but not before another phone camera lit up. The crowd was swelling, not in volume but in attention, an invisible jury waiting for the next move. One officer shifted his stance, boots scuffing against tile. "Ma'am, let's not make this harder. Step aside now." "Oh." Vanessa's grip tightened on her phone, but her voice stayed level. "I've presented my documents. I am not moving." The gate manager's smile curled into a sneer. "You people always think you can push your way through with fake cards and fake names. Not today." She extended her hand toward the officer. "Take her boarding pass." The taller officer reached out, plucking the slip of paper from Vanessa's hand. He examined it for half a second before folding it once, then twice, as though preparing to pocket evidence. The act wasn't violent, but it was dismissive, final. The sound of paper creasing carried farther than anyone expected. Gasps rippled through the boarding area. A woman in line raised her phone higher. "She bought that seat. I saw the scanner flash green." Another voice chimed in. "They're deleting her like she doesn't exist." The manager turned sharply. "If you interfere, you'll be removed from this gate." Her tone had hardened, feeding off her own authority. Vanessa inhaled slowly, her chest rising once, then settling. She looked at the folded boarding pass in the officer's hand and said nothing. The silence wasn't surrender, it was a blade, sharper than any accusation. The younger officer hesitated, eyes flicking from Vanessa to the passengers filming. For the first time, uncertainty cracked through his rigid posture. But the manager pressed forward, voice dripping with condescension. "Escort her to security. Economy passengers are waiting, and we don't have time for games." Economy passengers. The words hung heavy, a public demotion. Not about safety, not about rules, about image, about hierarchy. Vanessa finally spoke, her tone calm, deliberate. "You're making a mistake." The officer holding the pass snorted. "We'll be the judge of that." But the judgment wasn't his to give. Not today, not anymore. Behind them, a teenage girl whispered to her mother. "She doesn't even look scared." The mother replied, "That's because she knows something they don't." And she did. Every insult, every dismissal, every false label, Vanessa absorbed them not as wounds but as proof. Proof that the system was still broken. Proof that silence was never enough. Proof that when the reveal came, it would strike like lightning across a clear sky. The tension pressed in from all sides now. Officers poised, passengers watching, phones recording, and at the center, a woman standing still, carrying not only a suitcase and a phone, but the weight of an empire invisible to everyone who thought she didn't belong. The taller officer folded the boarding pass one last time, his knuckles whitening against the paper, as if crushing it would erase her presence entirely. The gate manager gave a sharp nod of approval, already turning toward the podium like the matter was settled. But Vanessa didn't flinch. Her body remained anchored in the center of the boarding lane, suitcase upright at her side. She didn't raise her voice, didn't gesture wildly, didn't plead. She let the silence expand until it felt heavier than the fluorescent lights humming above. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Phones kept recording. The moment begged for protest, but Vanessa offered none. Her refusal to perform outrage was more unsettling than if she had screamed. The younger officer leaned closer, whispering with a forced calm. "Look, just step away quietly and we'll avoid a scene." Vanessa's eyes flicked toward him, steady, unwavering. No words, just a gaze that made him swallow mid-sentence. He expected fear. He found composure instead. The manager slammed her hand on the counter. "Security now! Remove her!" Her voice carried across the gate, a command meant to assert dominance. But the more she barked, the smaller she seemed against the wall of cameras rising from the seats. Still, Vanessa stood motionless. The silence wasn't absence. It was pressure, an invisible hand squeezing the air tighter around everyone present. In her mind, a memory surfaced unbidden. She was 16 again, standing in a hotel lobby in Charlotte, wearing her Sunday dress, clutching her mother's purse. The clerk had told her, "Guests only," before escorting her outside like she was trespassing. That same knot of shame had burned her throat. Tonight, the airport echoed with that same chord, but Vanessa had learned how to hold it, reshape it, and turn it back. She exhaled, slow and deliberate. Then, finally, she spoke not to the officers, not to the manager, but into her phone. "Protocol active. Timestamp confirmed." The words were quiet enough to be intimate, yet sharp enough to slice through the tension. The assistant on the other end didn't need explanation. This was the trigger. The taller officer frowned. "What was that?" Vanessa turned her head slightly, her voice low, even, cutting. "Documentation," passengers murmured. A woman in the third row whispered, "She's not panicking. She's planning." The younger officer's hand twitched near his belt, but he didn't move. Something about her stillness made every action feel dangerous, not for her, but for them. The manager leaned over the counter, eyes flashing. "Enough games. You don't belong here, and your silence won't save you." Vanessa finally raised her gaze, pinning the manager with a look that seemed to pass straight through her. When she spoke, her words were measured, every syllable deliberate. "My silence is not surrender, it's evidence." Oh, the sentence hung in the air like smoke, curling into every corner of the gate. Phones caught it, hearts caught it, and for the first time, doubt flickered across the faces of those who thought she would be easy to erase. The silence cracked not from Vanessa, but from behind her. A faint click echoed as a camera phone tilted higher. Then another, then another. What had started as scattered whispers became the steady hum of a dozen recordings. In row 3, a woman in a denim jacket stood, her voice shaking but firm. "I saw her ticket scan green. She belongs here." The words weren't shouted, but they traveled. Heads turned. Screens lifted. The gate was no longer just a waiting area, it was an audience. The manager snapped her head toward the woman. "Sit down. This is none of your concern." But it was too late. A man 2 seats over raised his phone, narrating into the lens, "Gate B6, Seattle International. A black woman just got her boarding pass torn up in first class. Everyone here saw it." His voice wasn't angry, it was steady, like evidence being logged for the world. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. His jaw tightened, eyes darting between Vanessa and the glowing rectangles aimed at him. For the first time, the imbalance of power tilted. Authority wasn't only in uniforms now, it was in witnesses. A teenager whispered to her mother, "Why are they doing this?" The mother's reply was soft but audible, "Because they think she won't fight back." Vanessa didn't move. Her stillness gave the crowd room to speak. She didn't need to rally them. Injustice had done that for her. The manager slammed a stack of papers on the counter, voice rising. "Phones down! This is airline business!" But the words backfired. A man in a gray hoodie barked back, "Number, this is everybody's business." His phone stayed raised. The atmosphere shifted, charged now. Every passenger a potential witness. What had been private humiliation was now public trial. The taller officer leaned in, voice low but urgent. "Ma'am, the more attention this gets, the worse it'll be for you." Vanessa's head turned slightly, not toward him, but toward the sea of lenses. When she spoke, her tone carried farther than volume alone could explain. The worse it'll be, for who? A murmur rippled across the waiting area. Someone whispered, "She's right." Another, "This is going viral." The gate manager's composure cracked. She pressed her lips together, eyes darting toward the passengers, then back to the officers. The control she once held so firmly was slipping, one phone at a time. And Vanessa knew it. She let the silence stretch again, her posture unshaken. She wasn't pleading for rescue, she was giving the witnesses space to become what they already were, the chorus that would echo her truth. In the corner, a young flight attendant trainee barely in uniform, wings not yet pinned, bit her lip, eyes wide. She reached for her phone, hesitated, then slid it into her pocket, recording audio. Quiet but brave. For the first time, the balance of the gate had shifted. Vanessa wasn't standing alone anymore. The witnesses had risen. The story was no longer hers to tell, it was theirs to share. And the internet was already listening. The gate was no longer quiet. Every seat hummed with whispers. Every phone lens captured angles of injustice. But the gate manager refused to back down. She straightened her blazer, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Enough. This passenger is attempting fraud. Officers escort her out now." The taller officer glanced at her, uneasy. "Ma'am, the crowd," "I said now," she barked, cutting him off. Vanessa didn't move. Her calm presence made the manager's shouting sound shrill, desperate. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Then came a new voice, deeper, practiced, wearing authority like armor. A senior airline supervisor strode in from the adjoining corridor, his badge swinging from a lanyard. His expression was already set, stern, dismissive. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, though his tone suggested he'd already chosen a side. The manager jumped at the chance. "This woman tried to board first class with a fake ticket. She's disrupting the gate." The supervisor's gaze swept Vanessa up and down. No luxury handbag, no jewelry, just the green dress and steady eyes. He scoffed. "Figures. First class isn't a charity. Lady, you don't belong here." Gasps rippled across the gate. Passengers shifted, outrage bubbling. A man recording muttered, "He didn't even check her ID." The supervisor stepped closer, towering over Vanessa as if height alone proved authority. "You've embarrassed yourself enough. Economy is that way. Take it or leave the airport." Vanessa's eyes didn't waver. She didn't speak. Her silence made his words clang hollow in the air. The younger officer glanced toward the crowd, clearly unsettled. He saw the phones, the witnesses, the tension coiling like a live wire. Still, the supervisor pressed forward. "Last warning," he said, jabbing a finger toward the exit. "Leave now before we blacklist you from this airline permanently." A teenager filming near the window whispered, "Blacklist? For having a ticket?" Her friend shook his head, eyes wide. The manager folded her arms, smirking as if the matter were sealed. The officers shifted, preparing to move Vanessa by force. The supervisor leaned in, his words meant only for her but loud enough for microphones to catch. "You can glare all you want. At the end of the day, you're nobody. And nobody sits in 1 ampere." The phrase struck like a match. Phones caught every syllable. Passengers erupted in a chorus of disbelief. Someone shouted, "Check her ID!" Another, "She paid for that seat." But the manager only tightened her smirk, while the supervisor gestured to the officers. "Do your job." The stage was set. The insults had escalated from doubt to open humiliation. And still, Vanessa hadn't raised her voice once. She didn't need to. The louder they became, the closer they marched toward their own undoing. The supervisor's words still hung in the air. "You're nobody," passengers murmured, some shaking their heads, others filming more intently. The hum of tension had grown into a low roar of outrage. But the gate manager wasn't finished. Her eyes flicked toward the folded boarding pass in the officer's hand. "Give me that," she snapped, snatching it away. Without hesitation, she tore the ticket clean down the middle, the rip echoing through the gate like a gunshot. Gasps erupted. Phones zoomed in. A woman shouted, "That's destruction of property." Another cried, "She paid for that seat." The manager tossed the scraps into the trash as if discarding evidence. "Problem solved," she said coldly. "Now remove her." The younger officer froze, his jaw tight, his eyes flicking from the overflowing trash bin back to Vanessa. He had seen power abused before, but never under so many witnesses. The supervisor leaned in, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're finished. Either walk out on your own, or we'll have TSA drag you through this terminal in handcuffs. Your choice." Passengers erupted again. "Handcuffs? For what?" someone yelled. Another, "This is insane." Vanessa stood motionless, suitcase still upright, her phone at her side. Her face betrayed no fear, no desperation. She didn't chase the torn ticket. She didn't flinch at the threat. Instead, she let the silence stretch, pressing the humiliation back onto the people who thought it would bury her. A teenager in the corner whispered into her phone's mic, "They just ripped up her boarding pass." "This is discrimination." Live at Gate B6. The clip uploaded instantly. Captions auto-generating. "This is what racism looks like in 2025. The manager, flushed with false triumph, turned back to the crowd. "Show's over. She's not boarding this flight. Everyone else, return to your seats." But the passengers didn't move. They weren't just watching anymore. They were witnesses, each phone a mirror reflecting the ugliness unfolding. The taller officer stepped closer to Vanessa, hand hovering near her arm. "Ma'am," he said stiffly, "we're done asking. You're coming with us." For the first time, Vanessa moved not away, but forward. Just a single step, enough to freeze him in place. She lifted her phone, her voice calm, cutting, amplified by the microphones around her. "Timestamp that," she said evenly. "This is the moment they tore up a valid boarding pass. This is the moment they tried to erase me." The gate went silent. Even the officer hesitated. The weight of her words pressed into the space like gravity. The supervisor sneered. "Erase you? You were never here." It was the cruelest line yet, the kind meant to erase her existence completely. But in the sea of raised phones, in the outrage burning through the waiting area, the words backfired instantly, because everyone knew she was there, and now the whole world would too. The shredded ticket still fluttered in the trash can, a symbol of arrogance masquerading as authority. The supervisor's words, "You were never here," still lingered, foul in the air. Vanessa didn't rush. She didn't snap. Instead, she lifted her phone with calm precision and spoke, her voice carrying across the gate with surgical clarity. "Activate escalation protocol. Log incident as level 1. On the other end, her assistant's voice responded instantly, crisp and steady. "Confirmed. Recording and syncing with internal system now. Do you want legal looped in?" "Yes," Vanessa said, never raising her volume. "Notify counsel. Send alerts to the board. Timestamp Gate B6, Seattle International." The officer closest to her frowned, taken aback. "What the hell are you doing?" Vanessa turned her gaze on him, not sharp, not loud, just steady. "Protecting myself from you." Passengers erupted in whispers. Someone muttered, "She's not bluffing." Another added, "She's got people on the line." The supervisor scoffed, waving dismissively at her phone. "You think calling a friend changes anything? This is airline business. You have no standing here." "Oh." But the phones in the crowd kept recording, their little red lights glowing like a jury of 100 unblinking eyes. Vanessa raised her chin slightly, her presence suddenly larger than the space allowed. "Standing? Let me show you standing." Her thumb pressed the screen again. "Patch in Rachel." Seconds later, a calm female voice came through on speaker, amplified by the quiet around them. "Vanessa, we're connected. I've logged video from 3 angles. Security feeds confirm your check-in was valid. Do you want me to notify operations control?" The crowd gasped. This wasn't a bluff. It was infrastructure. The gate manager stammered, trying to seize control. This is irrelevant. She's trespassing." Rachel's voice cut in, sharper now. "Correction. She holds a valid ticket. Gate records show she was checked into seat 1 ampere. The supervisor's face drained, but he forced a smirk. "Anyone could fake that. I don't know who you think you are, lady, but this act ends now." Vanessa lowered the phone, meeting his eyes with calm steel. "It's not an act. It's accountability. And your time is running out." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones zoomed closer. Someone whispered, "She's flipping it on them." The younger officer shifted uneasily, his posture no longer certain. He glanced at the gate manager, then back at Vanessa. For the first time, he seemed unsure whose orders mattered. Vanessa's stillness cracked just slightly, her lips curved into the faintest edge of a smile. She had drawn the line, and for the first time, they knew it. The storm wasn't just coming, it had already begun. The gate had become a stage. Phones hovered like spotlights, recording every breath. The manager's smugness was cracking. The supervisor's bluster was losing weight. The officers, once certain, now looked unsure of their footing. And at the center stood Vanessa, calm, unshaken, holding her phone like a gavel about to strike. Rachel's voice echoed from the speaker again, crisp and undeniable. "Vanessa, the board is aware. Do you want me to confirm your standing?" Vanessa lifted her eyes to the supervisor, her tone razor-sharp but calm. "Number, I'll confirm it myself." She stepped forward, suitcase wheels humming against the tile until she stood directly between the two officers. The crowd leaned in, breath caught. "You want to know who I am?" she asked, her voice low, cutting through the gate like a blade. "I am Vanessa Carter, CEO and 30% shareholder of this airline. The seat you tore from me, the cabin you said I don't belong in, I own it." Gasps tore through the waiting area. A woman clapped a hand over her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," another voice cried, "I knew it." The supervisor froze, color draining from his face. You're lying." Vanessa didn't flinch. She tilted her phone toward him, Rachel's voice confirming on cue. "Board records validate her claim. Vanessa Carter is chief executive officer and principal shareholder. Everything you've done has been logged." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, heavy, like a storm about to break. Passengers erupted, some with disbelief, others with satisfaction. One man shouted, "You just humiliated your own CEO." Another chimed in, "And we all saw it." The younger officer stepped back, his jaw tightening. The taller one shifted uneasily, glancing toward the cameras. Their certainty had collapsed in an instant. The gate manager's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked at Vanessa as if seeing her for the first time and realizing she had already lost. Vanessa adjusted the hem of her dress, posture composed, voice steady. "You didn't see me. You saw what you expected to see, and you decided I didn't belong." The crowd roared in agreement. The weight of truth had flipped the room. The supervisor staggered, searching for words. We didn't know." Vanessa's gaze locked on him, cold but dignified. "That was the point. You didn't need to know who I was. You only needed to treat me with respect. And you failed." Phones captured every syllable, every angle, every humiliation turned confession. The reveal was complete. The power had shifted, and the people who thought they were untouchable were now standing on the edge of their own downfall. The name hit like thunder. Vanessa Carter, CEO, shareholder. The echo of it rolled across the boarding gate, louder than any command barked minutes before. The supervisor's face went pale, as if the ground beneath him had split open. His voice, once booming, now cracked into fragments. "Thursday, this can't, you should have said," but the sentence never found its end. His authority had evaporated the moment her identity filled the air. The gate manager's arms, once folded with smug certainty, now dangled useless at her sides. Her eyes darted to the trash can where the torn ticket still sat, damning in its simplicity. She looked as though she wanted to fish it back out, tape it together, undo the last 5 minutes of her own arrogance. But the crowd's cameras trapped her in place. Every twitch was recorded, every regret documented. The taller officer shifted back a full step, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting to his partner. The younger one looked stricken, sweat beading at his temple. He whispered, barely audible, "We've made a mistake." Around them, the passengers became a chorus of judgment. "She told you it was valid. You ripped up her ticket? Your own CEO. What were you thinking?" Phones lifted higher, angles closing in. The story was no longer just about Vanessa's humiliation. It was about their collapse, their unraveling, their faces branded into digital evidence that would outlive the gate, the day, maybe even their careers. The supervisor stumbled forward, desperation leaking from every syllable. "Miss Carter, this was a misunderstanding. If you'll allow us, we can correct." Vanessa cut him off with a glance, calm, precise. She didn't need to speak. The weight of her silence made his words crumble before they reached the air. The gate manager finally broke, voice high and trembling. I didn't know who you were." Vanessa tilted her head, her reply soft but devastating. "That's exactly the problem. You thought it mattered." The crowd erupted applause from some, gasps from others. A man in a navy blazer shouted, "That line right there, remember it." The younger officer lowered his eyes, shame flickering across his face. The taller one muttered, "We're finished." Even the flight attendant trainee, who had quietly been recording audio, now stood straighter, emboldened by the truth revealed. Her voice, tentative but steady, slipped into the chaos. "I saw her name on the manifest this morning. She was always listed in 1 ampere. The room stilled for a beat. The statement, simple as it was, became the final nail. They couldn't erase her now. She was written in their own system. The supervisor rubbed his temple, staring at the floor. The gate manager's breathing grew shallow. Her bravado collapsed into fear. The officers no longer flanked Vanessa. They hovered like ghosts, unsure of where to stand. Vanessa didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She let them drown in the silence of their own making. Because the truth had shifted everything, and from this point forward, they weren't in control. The gate held its breath. Phones recorded every flicker of panic on the faces that once carried smug certainty. But Vanessa Carter hadn't come to the airport to be erased. She had come prepared to end the cycle. She lifted her phone again, her voice calm, unwavering. "Rachel, patch me through to operations control." Within seconds, another voice joined the line, measured, professional, carrying authority the crowd could feel. "Miss Carter, this is Director Hayes. We're connected." Vanessa's gaze swept the manager, the supervisor, the officers. Her tone was steady, judicial. "Effective immediately, suspend Gate Manager Lewis from duty. Revoke access. Begin termination process for cause." Gasps rippled through the passengers. The manager's mouth fell open. You can't." But she was cut off by the beep of a system override. Her tablet on the podium blinked red, credentials locked. The supervisor stepped forward, voice trembling with forced bravado. "This isn't protocol." Vanessa didn't flinch. "Suspend Supervisor Daniels. Record his statements. Forward directly to the board for review." Again, the terminal beeped. A notification flashed across his badge scanner. A CESS denied. The color drained from his face, as if the floor itself had betrayed him. The taller officer tried to salvage control, his tone brittle. "Ma'am, you're making a scene." Vanessa turned toward him slowly, her voice measured. "Number. You made a scene when you threatened to drag your own CEO through this airport in handcuffs. Remove him from airline security detail immediately." Rachel's voice came through crisp. "Confirmed. Badge access revoked." The officer froze, his shoulders sagging as the reality struck. He no longer carried authority here. The younger one stepped back, guilt heavy in his eyes, waiting for judgment. Vanessa's gaze lingered, then softened slightly. Officer Patel documented hesitation, noted restraint. "Recommend reassignment, not dismissal." He blinked, stunned at the mercy, and nodded silently. The gate was silent now, except for the chorus of phones capturing history. Passengers began to clap, not the chaotic clatter of an angry mob, but slow, deliberate applause, each beat striking like a gavel. Vanessa lowered her phone, voice calm but unyielding. "Authority is not a weapon. It is a responsibility. And when you abuse it, you lose it." The manager's hands trembled at her sides. The supervisor's lips moved without sound. The taller officer stared at the floor, hollow. Around them, the passengers bore witness, their applause swelling. Vanessa adjusted her suitcase handle, her presence commanding yet composed. "This isn't vengeance," she said, her voice carrying through the gate. "This is accountability." The applause rose higher, echoing through the terminal. Every camera lens stayed fixed on her, and for the first time all night, the power in the gate belonged not to the uniforms, not to the podium, but to the woman they tried to erase, and she had just erased them instead. The echoes of applause rolled through Gate B6 like a tide reclaiming the shore. The officers, stripped of power, stood adrift. The manager's face was pale, her authority gone in an instant. The supervisor leaned against the counter, hollow-eyed, the red denial screen on his badge still glowing like a scar. Vanessa didn't revel in their collapse. She didn't need to. Justice was already done. She stepped forward, suitcase gliding quietly behind her, and turned to the crowd. Dozens of phones pointed at her, lenses gleaming like stars, but she didn't speak to the cameras. She spoke to the people. Today you saw what happens when dignity is dismissed. When judgment speaks louder than truth. When silence is mistaken for weakness. Her voice wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. Each word carried weight, sinking deep into the still air. "I stood here alone, and they decided I didn't belong. Not because of policy, not because of proof, because of prejudice, and that is the last mistake they will ever make. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the passengers. Some lowered their phones just to listen with bare eyes, as if recording wasn't enough. Vanessa's gaze swept the room, her presence magnetic. I don't need to prove myself to anyone at this gate. My existence is proof. My success is proof. And my silence, she paused, letting the moment breathe, was never surrender. It was patience, evidence, a chance for the truth to show itself. A woman in the back whispered, "That's power." Another said softly, "That's justice." Vanessa adjusted the strap of her dress, composure intact, elegance unshaken. Then she delivered the line that would outlive the gate, the night, even the viral clip. I don't need to record this moment, because I am the result of every moment like it, and I will not be erased. The gate erupted in applause, not scattered this time, but thunderous, united. Travelers stood, clapped, some even cheered. The sound rolled like a wave, washing away the ugliness that had filled the space minutes before. The younger officer bowed his head, quietly stepping aside. The trainee flight attendant lifted her chin, pride flickering in her eyes, and the crowd, once silent witnesses, now stood as allies, their phones raised not just for evidence, but for history. Vanessa nodded once, firmly, and turned toward the boarding lane. The sign above still glowed, first-class priority boarding. She walked through, not with defiance, but with quiet certainty, because she had always belonged there. And now, so did her truth.